Welcome to episode 3 of the Breathe Easy podcast. Today is a very special episode, especially for me and Shayak as well, right? Being climate tech entrepreneurs, we're getting insight from industry veterans in terms of, what investors will be looking at within the climate tech space, flow of capital into the space, right? Balancing things out like profit versus purpose, which personally will help us a lot, right? And hopefully a lot of entrepreneurs looking to build in the same space. Right, we're joined by, like I said, industry veterans, Sailesh from Anthill, right, Raiyaan from Transition VC, as well as Avnish sir from Accenture VC, right. Rather than me having to introduce the guests, right, I think they'd be more than happy to speak for themselves, give us an introduction. We can start with you, Sailesh, and then work upwards.
Sure. Thanks, Karan and Shaq, for having us. Real pleasure to be part of this. And of course, always good to catch up with Avnish and Raiyaan. And so I'm a partner at Anthill Ventures. We are a speed scaling platform which invests in early growth stage startups in urban tech and urban lifestyle, primarily focusing on scaling companies with speed sustainably across the globe with a focus on the Indian market. So we strongly believe in courageous founders disrupting the industry with ideas which are not hurting the environment, but trying to scale with speeds sustainably.
Great. Yeah. My name is Raiyaan. I am the managing partner of Transition VC.
Yeah.
We invest in climate tech startups. And one of our mission is to enable offset of 40 million tons of carbon emissions through our investments. To put context, that's roughly about 1% of India's total carbon emissions every year.
So very happy to be here. My name is Avnish Sabharwal. I'm the managing director of Accenture Ventures and Open Innovation Program. We basically partner, invest, and acquire deep tech, deep science, and climate tech startups. Our recent investment has been in a space tech startup called Pixel, which is helping us drive sustainability goals. We also acquired Flutura, which is an industrial AI startup now focused on decarbonization. Besides that, I'm involved in building a venture studio focused on climate and sustainability. And we also run the Accenture Value Accelerator program focused on sustainability with CII.co. I'm on the board of the School of Sustainability, IIT Madras. So very, very happy to be here.
No, it's a privilege to share a room with all of y'all, right? Coming in with so much experience and getting to learn as young entrepreneurs. But just to quickly, touch base on something we've seen personally change a lot within the Indian landscape, right? Is sustainability was not cool some time ago, right? When I started my journey, when Shai started my journey. So back in 2015, when I actually started deploying, right, we were building out climate infrastructure in rural Karnataka, and that was from a more non-profit perspective. And raising CSR capital for environment, right, was very difficult. All the capital flow was going into education, into healthcare, right? Nobody, while still sustainability, environment was sort of an ignored aspect, right? But recently we've seen a transition, whether it's, private capital from companies going into CSR for deployment environments, seeing a hike almost at the same level of education, of healthcare, right? Whether it's venture capital, right, being deployed currently. Climate tech is sort of reaching where probably fintech, right, or health tech was some time ago. So what brought around this transition over the last 2 years?
No pun intended.
Because it wasn't there when we started Breathe, right? And the ecosystem has been accelerating really fast. So wanted to understand that capital flow. How is it coming into India, right? And why is this ecosystem sort of growing so fast?
You want my take?
Anyone's. Feel free to chip in, guys. So Raiyaan, we can start with you.
Sure. I think one of the main driver in India has been that look at electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Mobility, which is decarbonizing the transportation sector, which is almost 30-35% of contributor to the carbon emissions today. One of the main reasons EVs have picked up in India is because the total cost of ownership, TCO, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, which is why if you look at certain applications, and that is where they have thrived.
Yeah.
which is mainly say B2B, two-wheeler delivery applications or the three-wheeler applications. Buses is picking up significantly. Passenger vehicle, in my opinion, will probably be the last one. So I would say the reason why there has been a big push is 1 rupee per kilometer is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it also enables carbon emissions. That's how I think a lot of Indian consumers and corporates are looking at it. I would say that was one of the major drive.
Yeah.
However, of course, there is also the whole net zero journey, the targets that we have set for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
India is at 2070.
Yeah.
Who's going to be alive by then? However, there are a lot of companies in India are also part of supply chain for global companies.
Exactly.
Where they have targets for 2040, 2050, and different countries have those targets, right?
Yeah.
So I think being a part of that value chain, the supply chain, a lot of companies are being forced to move towards it. There's a small role of government that we are seeing the role that they're playing in terms of, say, subsidies.
Yeah.
Or even perhaps the whole CBAM rule for steel export to Europe.
Totally.
Yeah.
Where now the companies are waking up to figure out that, hey, it's not about caring about environment, which some people do and some people don't.
Yeah.
It's about if you want to survive in this business, you have to comply to these rules. And how can they actually be part of the sustainability journey or the net zero journey?
Yeah, well, I actually want to transition to Avnish sir as well as, again, pun not intended, and Sailesh sir. I actually want to build upon a couple of things that you said, right? So first thing, the cost of 1 rupee per kilometer, right, sort of reminded me of this ad campaign that used to run where the only thing an Indian consumer would care about is kitna deti hai. Right?
Still true.
And it's still very true, right? But on a more serious note, in terms of Indian, right, and just looking at India specifically, you spoke about catering to global norms, right? With the EU taxonomy coming into play, right, with SFRD, and sorry if this is getting too technical.
SFDR.
Yeah,
PSRS.
PSRS. We'll get the editor to put up a note somewhere here, but with SFDR, ESRS, right, CSRD regulations and double materiality, how do you think a market that's so unaware, right, of global sustainability now, because it's been happening in the West for much longer than it's been happening here, is going to be competitive in terms of their exports to Europe, right? And how is that going to be?
I think Avnish would be better at answering this. What just my two pieces, I think there is a big gap in the market, which is where you as entrepreneurs can solve for this. Productizing it helps. Today, it is the consulting way people are looking at it, but building a solid platform where you make it easy for people who are part of the supply chain to comply with and not lose that business is something. I think Avnish would know this very, very well.
No, I think you covered some of the key points, but going back to your first question as well, that whether climate tech is in where health tech or fintech was, I don't think it is there, to be honest. We are still in early stages as far as climate is concerned, but you can see the green shoots coming. And if you look at the proportion of money, investor money, which is going in sustainability and climate tech versus some of the other things, except for AI. Let's take AI out of it. That is definitely the number one. But otherwise, yes, the proportion starting from a small base is growing faster. Right? And then you have funds which are now specific to climate as well, which was missing earlier. There used to be a small portfolio of a bigger fund which was focused on that. But now you have, Avana, for example, you have Synapses, just like, I think, opened up $125 million fund, and others are coming up as well.
Transition VC.
Yes.
So I think because of all this, there is definitely a momentum. But basically, it is the regulation and compliance along with the cost. They are still the two biggest
drivers
factors and drivers of people moving towards climate and sustainability.
But do you also think there's regulation compliance is one thing, but also do you think there is a financial angle to it in terms of, for example, let's say real estate, right? Sustainable assets, right, get about 17% additional yield on rents. Right, you have private equity players sort of coming into play, especially with organized real estate in India, right, with the REITs forming. all of this is increasing the value of organizations. Do you think that along with regulations is a core driver, or is regulation still more upfront than finance?
Well, I think, as I said, along with regulation, it is the cost.
Yeah.
And I'm associated with one of the biggest real estate companies for whom I'm building the venture studio.
Yeah.
And when we talk about, one of the parts of our thesis is build environment, right? And sustainable buildings and
Correct.
sustainable materials.
Yeah.
And when I discuss with the promoter, they say that, see, this is all great. But if I use all these materials and it makes me uncompetitive in the market,
Correct.
then I will not be able to do this.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the intent is there.
Yeah.
But till the time we are able to balance the cost equation and give sustainable solutions which are much more cost competitive than the existing solutions, till then the needle will not move. So that's why I still say that either the regulation will force you.
Yeah.
From an India point of view, we have a 2070 target, but if you want to export, then you have to do it. So that's the compliance bit there. Right?
Yes.
And second is if you can get the cost under the line.
Yeah.
Both these things are the ones.
Yeah.
I would have thought that, our focus on humanity and triple bottom line, especially after COVID, to be honest.
Yeah.
If COVID taught us one lesson, it was this.
Yeah.
That if you don't take care of the environment will take care of you. But we have a very short memory, I think.
Yeah.
Before we go ahead, anyone belonging to the global supply chain, we make it easier for you. So please reach out to us and info@VRS. Kidding. I think, sir, you raised an important point and I wanted to ask all of your opinion. I'll start with Sailesh, right? VCs play an important role, especially in India, in directing multilateral capital towards India, right? Because all of you, I'm sure, have spoken to LPs outside of India and you play a really important role in bridging that gap for Indian founders. They can't access this directly. Can you tell us about your experiences with what is being said in these circles about climate tech specifically? And then what they feel about the India opportunity now, maybe versus 5-10 years ago, right? Since you guys have been operating and you've seen the cycles, what is the kind of conversation that's going on and how does climate tech play a role in this capital movement?
No, absolutely right, Shaq. Like for us, when we are, especially in conversation with LPs or friends or partners from the Nordic region or from the West, we see a lot of interest in the Indian ecosystem because it's a market no one can ignore.
Yeah.
And all of them don't want to miss the boat when the gates open up. In terms of awareness, in terms of government policies, in terms of cost, as we mentioned, all of them become viable and becoming a story which no one can afford to miss, with a population of 1.4 billion and growing. And with a population of 900 million people under the age of 40, I think that's a remarkably conscious community, which is driving the growth of the country. And as I was discussing earlier, a society is expected to be thriving if the folks are planting seeds for which they never see the shade of. And I think that's exactly what the government is waking up to do globally and in India. I think that's where we'll be able to see a lot of entrepreneurs, unlike in the past, build in India and scale for India. Having said that, we see a lot of Nordic partners asking us if we see some really cool climate tech companies which they can scale up in that part of the world and the West, because for them, the yield on their investment is much better there. The awareness is so much more, and the overall value creation is much more appreciated there compared to here. As Karan just said, at the end of the day, Indians will ask you, Kitna dete? And I think we can't ignore the harsh reality. Yeah. But we had a group of Family Office Alliance partners from the Nordic region visit India in January. And they were remarkably astonished by the development in India, be it infrastructure, be it the awareness, be it the connectivity, be it the government's push towards the entire India growth story, and how the policy is backing it to a large extent. And I think that's where even as us as VCs are keen to bridge the gap and bring in capital from external countries to India and see how we can be the front runners in creating that innovation and disruption.
Yeah. Planting the seeds you never see the shade of is probably what's wrong with the current carbon offset market as well.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
There is increased interest in LPs to also know what impact is their capital going to make.
Yeah.
So which also makes us work a little bit more on the governance piece, measuring impact and reporting better. So that's an area where honestly we are learning. Last 10 years of my life, I've been investing in tech.
We can teach you.
Made some money, but didn't really focus on measuring impact and reporting. So that's an area where honestly I am learning. And the investors really like that piece. They want to know what are, apart from the IRR and MOIC that you made, what job creations have you done?
The purpose.
What carbon emissions enabled, right? So,
I think just to add to what is being discussed here, if you look at the Indian climate tech startup ecosystem, right, about 95% of the investment is still going into area, which is mobility and clean energy. So there is a big, segment of sustainability or climate tech, whichever one you want to call it, right? Whether it is circularity or whether it is, renewable energy or whatever. There's still things which are not there, right? Regenerative agriculture and all these. And if you look at the pattern of investment in India, because I started off doing investments in deep tech. Actually, to your earlier question, I see climate tech where deep tech was a few years back, right? There used to be a handful of startups. And that was it. Now deep tech has come a long way, right? Deep science is still evolving. And I call climate tech tough tech. Right? Because it is deep tech on steroids. Right? If deep tech was difficult, climate tech is like, as I said, double the tough part of cracking it.
We call it hard tech, with pun intended. It's actually hardware innovation. Right?
I think those things are important for us. So it's an evolution, and things are moving, I think, which is a good thing from a investor perspective as well. Like Accenture is making quite a lot of investments in this area. We have invested in a startup called Pulse CSG. For example, Ketos is another one, which is a big one on water. Planet Labs. I talked about Pixel earlier. Even Sky High, which is in social sustainability. For us, it's a base thing. Our CEO 10 years back said that every business will be a digital business. And now she says every business will be a sustainable business. And sustainability is the new digital.
Amazing.
Okay.
I think one thing that I wanted to get you guys' personal views on, and I think Sir said it at a perfect time for us to segue, because me personally, I find regen ag something that is completely underserved, right? Agriculture is like basically 1/6 or one of the 6 largest sectors that are contributing to our carbon emissions, along with power, transport, aviation, and cement and steel. So I wanted to double click on that with all of you guys, right? What is one aspect that you personally are interested and enthusiastic about beyond mobility and clean energy, because EVs have been driven to the ground, so to speak, right? So what is that one part you would like to highlight to potential entrepreneurs watching this, right? This is where you should look. This is where we need solutions. And this is where we personally feel, as the guys that are building this ecosystem, we want to look for solutions. Maybe we can start with you.
Sure. So our entire thesis, we call it climate tech, but is more focused on energy transition. Energy transition, when we've actually broken it down and looked at the opportunity, we see this as a $250 billion opportunity by 2030 in India.
Totally.
And we've broken it down, right? What consumes energy and what generates energy. This is the opportunity. We've got to decarbonize and electrify this. So what consumes energy is transportation, buildings, industries. So EV mobility transportation is just one piece of it, about 30%. Where we obviously have seen a lot of headwinds. But how, even if you look at our portfolio, how we are moving ahead, right? So we've made a bunch of investments in EV and mobility. But the next few investments that you would see is in decarbonization of industries. We see a massive opportunity in the entire value chain of decarbonization of industries. And I believe you are playing that piece as well as ESG, right? So alternative fuels, energy efficiencies.
So
the first step is, before trying to get hydrogen or
Yeah.
breakthrough innovation or even carbon capture, for example,
Yeah.
can we figure out a way to be more efficient with the
What we
existing
have.
process?
Exactly. Yeah.
Can we reuse the heat in
Yeah.
certain ways and form, or can we move that heat to electricity and reuse it internally?
So important.
So I think that's a massive opportunity. Net zero journey in buildings, again, perhaps it's also very hard to solve for. And again, energy efficiency, HVAC.
Yeah.
There is so much optimization that we can do. 40% of energy bill is that.
Yeah.
And if we just take that as a promise or a solution to anyone who's operating a decent sized building, would love to, because you're just saving your electricity bill.
Yeah.
Net zero impact is after that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a massive opportunity on the how we consume
Yeah.
and how we generate. There is renewable source,
Obviously.
wind, solar, etc. There's very little innovation we can do in terms of improving its efficiency.
Yeah.
There have been some innovations globally, but the levelized cost of energy doesn't seem to make sense. But what I believe the massive opportunity here, almost $25 billion opportunity, is energy storage.
Storage.
What do you
recovery.
do with that energy that you capture?
Yeah.
You just let it go. Is there a way you can perhaps store it, even long duration storage or different types of storage technologies? I think I would love for entrepreneurs to work on this.
Yeah.
For example, redox flow batteries is an area that we really want to invest in. And
Yeah.
there is one entrepreneur in India who's built, who's not even selling in India.
Yeah.
Guys, take notes.
Right. I would love to invest in this. Thermal batteries.
Yeah.
Would love to invest in. Even if someone says, hey, I want to build thermal batteries and this is how we will
Yeah.
build it without a product, I would love to back.
Idea based.
Right. So I think there's a massive opportunity there. Also, we want to play with India's strengths, right?
Yeah.
What is India's strength? Have we been able to build breakthrough technologies in the past?
Yeah.
Perhaps not. Do we have those kind of billions of dollars flowing in our university for R&D? Clearly not. We have still become a huge economy by playing our strengths, which is engineering, services, and building systems, subsystems on top of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
While sticking to those strengths, where we're not trying to build some breakthrough chemistry and fighting a battle which we probably won't win, but building for India is an area where we see a massive opportunity, which is where power electronics comes to play.
Yes.
Across the entire energy transition domain.
Yeah.
And finally, hydrogen. Again, it's a big boys play. There are areas where we can still work on building tech to bring down the cost of production, ease the transportation, mobility part, right? For industries and then eventually even mobility. So these are the areas I believe, probably a very long answer, but I believe where the gaps are and we want to invest.
Long answer. Very
relevant. Yeah.
Absolutely agree with most of them. So Accenture's focus is because we are more focused on deep tech and deep science. So decarbonization of hard to abate industries, that's number one priority for us. And we have very, very big industrial clients who have very ambitious transition to net zero kind of targets. So I think for us, we see that as a big opportunity. Along with that, another thing which we are very interested in is sustainable supply chains and sustainable value chain, right?
Yeah.
So, especially as you start looking at scope 3
Yeah.
kind of emissions, that
Again.
is also a big focus for Accenture.
Yeah.
And besides that, if you look at mobility as well, one is the OEM part, but the other bit, which we were talking about, Ryan, as well, is about the batteries and the infrastructure. So the overall supporting part of the mobility, not necessarily
So
the
true.
OEM, because that's definitely saturated in terms of our motorcycles and scooters and cars. All that is happening, but there has to be a big infrastructure which needs to accompany this, right? If you look at the Nordic countries, that's one of the reasons. Even China, the infrastructure is there. We came up with our own REVA long time back, but if the infrastructure and policies and subsidies existed that time, we would probably be in the driving seat as far EV vehicles are concerned.
Shout out to the men.
So I think the opportunity around the whole OEM bit about how do you support that is pretty phenomenal as well.
That's a massive opportunity. Most of our investments actually are in the value chain, and that's our thesis.
Yeah.
So we invest in battery tech. We have invested in motor controller. Now we're looking at power electronics, microcontrollers that go into the same, the entire value chain. I think that's the next wave.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think value chain is very important because if you're not creating end-to-end cycle, you're always falling off the wagon or dependency is always high outside the country.
Yeah.
Which even for most of the startups, we keep telling them, when you arrive at a solution or arrive at a product, ensure that you have end-to-end lifecycle management and reduce dependencies outside the country.
Yeah.
Because
So
today with the Make in
important.
India campaign and the government supporting it through be tax incentives, manufacturing support, grants, and other aspects, how can we essentially bring the entire practice in-house? I do agree and understand that there are certain industries we might not be able to disrupt today, but
Yeah.
those are for your offering maybe the next half a decade or decade from now. And at Anthill, we strongly believe in the built environment, sustainability, and waste, or say water and waste management.
Yeah.
And with our program called Gruvas Aspire,
Yeah.
we strongly believed in that for the last 2 years in trying and pushing out around 10 companies. And some of them have been brilliant in terms of like be it Zeeran from Guwahati, which has, come up with a recyclable brick, recycling plastic. And they have cracked a model where they've really gone local and got the support of the local government and local ecosystem to essentially ensure all the new buildings are built with their bricks, be it a Starbucks, be it an Adidas, be it convenience store. And then they've moved to Mumbai, where once they've realized they've been able to get best practices there.
Yeah.
Similarly, company like Earth Focus, which has started with water savers and then gone on to build a solution around cooling towers.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much potential among Indian entrepreneurs to really take a stab at what is a large problem. And I believe that if you're able to get the right blend between environment, sustainable materials, and living material, I think you're able to essentially make infrastructure or buildings like a repository for the new buildings. And that's when you're able to talk about circular economy and reduce wastage.
Yes.
One, I think I have always struggled with one part of the sustainable materials, which is that, how long does it take to introduce a new material into the into the construction industry, right?
Correct,
So it's the innovation is one part of it, but it's not the easiest quickest to actually introduce a new material in this industry.
Absolutely. And I think we've seen the challenge as well at Avnish, where even in our programs where we have over 100 corporate partners, we've seen a lot of folks come in and ask a startup, we'd love to work with you, but in the next 3 years, our visibility of probably 6 million square feet or 600 million square feet. If you look at our partner DLF and DLF Family Office, and like, can you supply it by tomorrow? We'll give you a purchase order. And the guy is, shocked, is in awe. He's like, wow, somebody's believing in me, but I can't service this. Clearly, I can't do it, even if I have all the resources or the money, because you don't have the supply chain and you have restrictions in manufacturing here. How do you overcome that is again a challenge which I see the ecosystem has to play an active part and solve for it, where the entrepreneurs can play a massive role in it. And I think climate finance is going to be one of the most important sectors cropping the next decade.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to what Avnish was saying in terms of infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
Right. What we are discussing actually allows me to segue into the next topic of discussion, right, which is profit versus purpose, right? So you touched upon the triple bottom line, right? Now, wanted to get a better understanding of how, when startups are scaling, right, at a rapid pace, and especially startups centered around sustainability, how do they sort of balance profit with purpose as they try to achieve exponential growth? Because as history sort of told us, right, you can't really achieve too much speed and remain sustainable at the same time.
See, this is a classic dilemma which sustainability has been facing right over time, and that's one of the reasons why the pace of adoption of sustainability startups has been rather slow. But if you look at from a startup's perspective, I feel that that there is no one answer to this, right? It depends upon, for example, the industry you are, the kind of technology you are working with. So there are multiple factors which will dictate. Overall, I think there has to be a nice balance. But if the startup is not able to get, let's say, to a product market fit kind of a stage, for them to look at sustainability seriously, while it sounds good, it's very difficult. Look at another thing which I often see missing in startups, look at data confidentiality and security, right? If you are a startup, where data is important, but there are other things you are building. This is probably one of the last things.
Yeah.
It just shows that it's not that the founders don't want to focus on.
Yeah.
But there are 100 things which you are looking at, 100 KPIs you are running after.
Yeah.
So I think you have to attain some sort of scale before you can, start looking into sustainability. But on the other hand, I think it's very clear now that it is not an option, right? Especially if you are serious about raising funds from, global and international VCs, even Indian VC.
Yeah.
They are all insisting to look at how you are adopting sustainable, practices in your business. Even, for example, when we look at Accenture, how are we doing software engineering, for example, right? Green IT, green cloud.
For sure.
These are big things
For
for
sure.
Accenture and for our clients as well.
Yeah.
So I think, overall, it has to be a good mix as you go ahead. You look at startups, for example, not a startup any longer, but if you look at Tesla, for example, right?
Yeah.
Or you look at Amazon, all of them started, with the purpose that, they're going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
But they had to build and go to a particular scale before they could, really show the KPIs which are relating to sustainability.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably something which I would advise the startup entrepreneur, that they need to have it inbuilt into their business strategy and business model.
Yeah.
But it may not be the first thing which you do, unless you are a startup only which is focused on, just like you guys.
Yeah.
I think you have to walk the talk, definitely.
Yeah.
But for another one which is, let's say, into e-commerce or something else, I think a good balance is nice.
For sure. Anyone building in AI, please think about how much energy and water your GPUs are guzzling. Please. Okay.
That's also an opportunity for founders to build energy efficiency.
Yes. And go serverless, guys, please.
And I was just reading that the energy bill of Microsoft has increased by about 25% because all the focus on AI.
No, even in India, what's actually very weird is if you look at the CE emission factors that came out for this year, right? Our emission factors actually increased by 0.5, right? Which means 0.05, but which means that India energy efficiency has gone in the opposite direction, right? When global emission factors for electricity consumption are actually falling, right? So that's also somewhere we really need to build upon, obviously.
It's a massive opportunity, how I view it. I mean, it's a challenge, which is also an opportunity.
Yeah.
Profit versus purpose, right? I think, why does it have to be either or? Why can't it be both and?
Yeah.
Right?
Always.
I think that's an approach. It's hard to build it in, like Avnish clearly said, in companies, legacy companies just already running.
Yeah.
But if you have this mindset from design phase of the product or solution that one is building, then I think it can go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And that is perhaps the way forward. It should probably be both together. And which is where, again, coming back to why climate tech or EVs adoption is working or making so much sense in India today, right? Is because profitability makes sense.
Yeah.
And you are also solving the purpose, and it came from the design level.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to plug in sustainability in existing product, which is extremely hard. And that's when the founders have to think about, should I go towards profitability or sustainability? And it's clashing all.
Yeah. There's a misalignment.
Yeah. I think solving from the design phase can be a game changer. However, I think also it is important to focus on profit or have a extremely good focus on profit, because without resources, you can't really solve for anything.
Yeah.
You have to
And
make
that
a
is
viable.
the line that gives you resources to solve for every other problem.
Yeah.
I think, just to add to that, for us, until we've invested in about 81 companies so far.
Wow, 81.
And-
Amazing, man.
Thank you. And we hope to grow that numbers substantially with each year. But what we've seen is when after post-COVID, we did analysis of which companies are really struggling with COVID, during COVID, post-COVID. And then we did an ESG analysis as well last year. And then we realized most of them do not understand what ESG means, except for the definition.
Yeah.
And we didn't blame them because, as Avnish mentioned, it's also about the timing. And if you look at a company like Bira, which is an industry which is least, sustainable, they have grown to a very large scale And only then they started talking about being sustainable, being green, going with bottles which are more sustainable, the practice which is more environmentally friendly. Similarly, we see a lot of young founders who like to do everything at the same time. And we always tell them that balance is very important. And we tell them that you do not have the bandwidth to do everything on day one. And that's where we say that be it Anthill or anybody who's running a program, try and take their support. Asking for help is something which really helps the founder go the distance. And focus on what's true to you. Like for instance, breathe ESG. Guys, focus on what's true to your growth. Your industry which is encompassed around sustainability. And one role that you play is educating your customer, vendor, consumer, every single stakeholder, including investors like us. So I think you play a massive role in doing it, but at the same time, having the right balance between when do you be sustainable, when do you start thinking about sustainable, at the same time ensuring that at every point in time, be it to an investor, be it to your employees or to yourself, you're always being a profit center, not a cost center. You cannot essentially say, I'm going to be sustainable at the cost of somebody else's money. You can be a Tata Trust and say, I'm happy to be a philanthropic organization and allowed to be sustainable and burn so much. It works in the larger gamut of things. But at a startup's young life, we always emphasize that build a solution to scale, create the impact, because a lot of large funds, Indian and global, are today asking what is the impact you're creating beyond the rupee return or the dollar return. And that's great. But end of the day, it always boils down when the finance person enters the room. How much am I giving you? How much is my ROI? Be it 2 years, 10 years as well. But tell me the numbers, and it has to have that path. And I think that's where our income tax in India has also come out stronger now and said you have to submit, every startup and fund has to submit what have been the projections for the next 2 years, and have they met them or not. Based on that, they're taxing them as well. So I think it's an important practice, which I believe will attain maturity, but I think it's going to be hand in hand with everybody in the ecosystem, as you always believe.
After the funding winter, I heard this interesting term being thrown around of the cockroach startup, where you gotta be survive.
Cockroach has always been there, after COVID.
You gotta focus on the financial fundamentals as well. I think Indian entrepreneurs especially, listen to us. The big dream is good. The vision is good, but you got to focus on running a fundamentally solid and viable business, because that's what separates us. I think you had mentioned earlier about how one of the superpowers of India is the fact that we can take something that's been developed. Maybe we don't have the right infrastructure for breakthroughs, but once a breakthrough has been made, we can turbocharge it to the next level. And absolutely. That's something that all of us have in us and should be proud of.
I totally agree with what Raiyaan is saying, that it needs to be there if you're making a product at the design stage, but if you are making something else, it needs to be part of your business model. Right? Now, how that will get implemented, what's the roadmap, that's fine. But it should not come as an afterthought.
Correct.
But the execution can be based on where you are at what stage of your maturity. But I think today's entrepreneurs definitely need to have that as part of their strategy and business model. And if you are building a product, then yes, if you can incorporate, in fact, one of our startup does that. Exactly, Simreka. They are basically helping companies, do sustainable product design, right at the start. So if you have that opportunity, absolutely. And it should definitely be reflected in your overall KPIs as well as the business model.
Absolutely. And I think even with Breathe ESG, we had a conversation about how we get all our companies ESG compliant, or at least in that thought process, and have them work with them to at least give a few guidelines for them to be educated and align with. And as you rightly said, I think it's very important that they have it as part of their building plan. When they get to execute it is a matter of time, but it's very important to have it in their ethos.
And also, I feel that it's a great attraction of talent as well.
Yes.
Right. So if you are a small startup, in fact, we see it in Accenture as well. We do a lot of work at, when we are hiring there, a lot of questions are asked to Accenture on, what is our ESG strategy and how we are doing on that. When is our transition to net zero and all that. So I think that today's generation definitely values this much more and is very keen. So I think for a young startup to attract good talent, it's not a bad thing to have as well.
Same for LPs as well, Avnish. A lot of our Nordic LPs ask the same question. How are your startups contributing to, or how they comply with ESG and contributing to the overall impact of the Vision 2070?
I think touching upon that, right, and LPs, or mainly international LPs that have a lot of ESG funds, right? ESG funds are almost 10x over the last 2 to 3 years, right? Wanted to touch upon a couple of things, right? So one is, how do you actually deal with international investor pressure for doing ESG across, right? Is that trickling down to venture capital, right? Like Sailesh said, that sort of top-down pressures coming on them. We have, for example, put out ESG reports for venture capital companies like Fireside Ventures, right? Now, at what stage do startups, right, non-sustainability oriented startups, right, or actually start thinking about their ESG metrics, right, disclosing that into the public realm? And as they grow to become a part of, the global value chain, then how do they think about compliances, et cetera, that something that's normally something a startup hasn't been bothered with till date?
I think both the VCs are probably better suited to answer that question. We don't have the pressure of external investors.
Which is amazing for you.
We have our own
Internal,
issues to tackle them, but this is not one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, so there is, and I think Sailesh knows this better. What we have, we've seen is there is interest, which I mentioned earlier, that they would want us to track and report. However, I don't see pressure to say, okay, you have to deploy to get certain results from an impact point of view out. It's more about having the right mindset, aligning with that mindset, and going in with the right intent to solve for it. Yeah. So unlike the pressures one would see in terms of, say, IRR, I personally don't see an impact reporting or impact KPI pressure. What right now everyone wants to do is to make sure that fund managers have that mindset and are working towards it. That is one thing that LPs are definitely looking to measure in some way or form, rather than giving targets. Whereas an IRR has and always been a target.
Yeah, but then sort of expanding to that, right? We've seen a lot of firms become, especially venture capital firms, become signatories to UNPRI, right? So is that a checkbox, right? In full honesty, looking at the larger ecosystem,
it helps. It's not. It's not a massive enabler.
Yeah,
it shows that you have the intent. I would say that.
So it's a checkbox, or is it something that they're looking at seriously, right? Because that's something that we fail to understand as startups.
They would do it without UNPRI also. Even the DFIs or, say, the biggest impact investors, it's more about what is the mindset. However, yes, in most cases, people would be a signatory.
Yeah, I think we've seen it as not as a must-have, but a good to have.
Yeah.
And most of them don't mandate it, but it well aligns with their thought process, their mindset, and they feel that they are creating impact through this investment directly into a startup or through a fund. And at times you've seen them asking us about our previous investments, previous fund reports on ESG. And I think, as Raiyaan mentioned, it's more about as a fund manager, what we think about ESG, the entire monitoring piece, because they all know that India is still fairly new, nascent to this entire climate reporting or monitoring. But they feel that the growth from the last, let's say, the decade to the last 2 years has been aggressively growing. So they don't want to lose the edge on the curve. And I wouldn't say they're pushing us, but they essentially keep requesting us to trickle that down to the startups, kind of monitor it, track it, and bring it back to their reporting so it can add to the larger gamut of things.
I think from an Accenture point of view as well, there is a lot of pressure from our customers. So while we may not have the LP pressure, but we have something called what we call value 360 degrees. And as part of that, whenever we announce our results to the street, besides the financial, one of the big metrics which we announce, and Julie Sweet, our CEO, announces is on our how we are doing on a transition to net zero kind of thing. And our goal is actually in 2025.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We will be totally into the transition.
Wow.
Yeah.
Complete the transition by 2025. We will also be having gender equality by 2025.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Yeah.
So both of these and other KPIs are equally regarded when we go into the street and announce our numbers. So, for us, it's a very big deal. And the sustainability is driven right at the top by our global CEO.
Yeah.
2025 is amazing. I haven't heard any corporate say that. And I really hope you'll achieve it.
Yes, we
No,
are.
I think they're on track to do it.
On our way to
Yeah.
achieve it.
Yeah, and that's amazing to learn, because what recently happened is majority of the companies, right, and a large majority of companies that are committed to SPTI fail to meet their deadline targets, right? So they have to now go back to the drawing board and reset those. So for a company to actually achieve SPTI targets is...
I think that's what will happen with most companies. A lot of them have set targets, and it's going to be hard for them to achieve. I hope Accenture achieves it. I'm sure you're
Well, not only will we achieve it, but we are helping our clients achieve
We should
it.
be more
Sustainability is big business for Accenture.
No doubt, no doubt.
So I think a lot of corporates or a lot of companies, even governments, would perhaps miss their targets, which I think is still okay, because you've moved so much closer to your target.
Yes.
And that is what matters.
Yeah.
We have to have some grace and slack when we're looking at these things, because when we're talking about achieving these targets, and like a lot of people, we are in these circles and we are also on the ground, right? When we talk about India's 2070 target, people are like 2070. What the hell? Even even Karan just mentioned that our mix, so basically our emission factors went up because our coal mix actually increased. You have to understand that India has a legacy of poverty as well that we have to solve. And when we're talking about reaching net zero in 2070, or if we're talking about a company having a far off target, right? This is achieved in steps. Like, it's not like it magically goes to zero. It happens year on year. And sometimes there are trade-offs that have to be made, and we should appreciate progress, celebrate the small victories. Yeah. We've spoken a lot about climate tech while we've been here, but having the opportunity to have you guys in the room, I think it would be remiss if we didn't actually get your thoughts on venture capital as a whole in India. I mean, we probably saw it start off in the mid 2000s, right? Instead, 2010s, we saw the first wave. 2020, we saw a cycle crash, and now we're continuing on. I think it's pretty strong, the Indian ecosystem. We always hear about dry powder and things like that. Just wanted to hear you guys' first-hand experience, and more than that, for our viewers to get someone's first-hand experience of how this entire ecosystem experience has been for you from the venture capital point of view. Because everyone talks about the startups and everyone reads about the deals, but it's not that easy. And, you guys don't get the credit you guys deserve for making all of this possible. So would love to, all of you one by one, hear about what that journey has been like.
No, absolutely, Shaq. I think it's been a thriving industry, not just in India, but globally. And I don't think VCs have ever been underappreciated. But I think the number has been growing substantially, not just year on year, but month on month. And I think if you look at the new norms set by SEBI, including the NISM new exam, which has been taken by every investment manager, it kind of goes to show that the market is maturing, not just in mutual funds or the capital markets, but also in the venture capital space. And you see a new, fresh breath of air when you see young founders turned venture capital, and you see India stemming from venture capital into organized family offices, be it single or multiple, and a lot of ultra HNIs coming out and investing the capital into this asset class. And I think that's a great, great way to support companies when they are stemming, which helps VCs back them while they're growing. I think that's always been the large gap, which even when us as Anthill 10 years ago started in India, that was the big gap we saw between post-seed and before Series A. You have a lot of VCs established ones, be it global or homegrown, from Series A and beyond, including corporate venture capital. And I'm proud to say I know at least more, if not hundreds, not thousands, at least more than hundreds of corporate venture capital, large corporate venture capital, are quite active in today's country. And I'm sure Avnish can speak more about corporate venture capital, But we've seen a lot of these bodies professionally come together, create startups as an asset class, invest into them, support them, and not look at short-term exits. Because as VCs, we do have the treasure of returning money back to the LPs. But then we've seen a lot of dry powder coming from these family offices, corporates, institutions, and FII into VCs to support that growth, to create a seed fund, a growth fund, and then an opportunities fund. And that's where, even in our journey, when we started off in India, we've seen us test the waters with a smaller fund and then get into a much larger fund today. And we see the market maturing where startups are able to get debt as an opportunity, but not equity. And VCs are enabling that, and it's not just NBFCs or banks, which shows that the ecosystem is thriving. And I think the government has been very prudent in saying that though 2070 is the target, we wish to achieve that by 2050. And as you know, if proof in the pudding is with Accenture trying to achieve that by 2025, we are hopeful that all of us can work together to make that true for the country as well by 2050. And I think that's where all of us are hoping to see that they come sooner than later.
Well, I think the corporate venture capital industry definitely has come a long way. When we started,
you're a veteran.
Anything going on?
A pioneer.
Pioneer.
That used to be actually something which used to disappoint me. In fact, not only the corporate venture capital, but also domestic, money. There was not much domestic money flowing, especially into deep tech and those kind of areas. Yeah, otherwise, there was there. But I think, as Sailesh was saying, that we have now about 100 plus CVCs. And what they provide is patient capital, right? It's much more patient. They don't have generally the LP on their, breathing on their neck. So I think technologies which require long gestation periods, especially, are good and well aligned to what the CVCs are able to do. The other thing which excites me is angel investing. Actually, that's come a long way as well. Although from a global point of view, it's still a very small number. But angel investing, and especially investors from second tier, third tier cities, how active they have become in this whole space is wonderful as well.
Yeah.
So I think angel investing, you can definitely see a huge surge, which is going to happen for quite a long time in India.
I think venture capital is a massive opportunity. It's a lot of fun from outside, but there's a lot of drill inside.
Yeah.
So we are also like a startup of startups.
Yeah.
We also raise capital.
Yeah.
But we also have to deal with a big chunk of portfolios and making sure they grow. We also share the burden of founders to ensure they continue raising capital.
Yeah.
So it is a drill from the inside, but it is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But what I'm very excited about India and the Indian venture capital opportunity is what we've seen in the past in the US, where VCs were enablers for Google, for Facebook, Meta, for Amazon. I think we are at the cusp where we would be, as venture capital community, enablers for such large, massive companies that would contribute significantly to the GDP of India.
Yeah.
And that is what drives me, honestly.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm like the most excited about.
All right. So VCs aren't just drinking and socializing at events. It's a mighty good.
Constantly fundraising.
But I think the concept of patient capital needs to be looked at, right, from a VC perspective. It's great to hear this, what Raiyaan is saying about when people ask why the Facebook or a Google never come out of India. That's one of the reasons, right, that we don't have that kind of patient cap. That's where I was talking about CVC as well, and academia. Yeah. Right, we need to have many more IIT Madrasas. There's only one, which at the moment is there. But we need much more active participation from academia as well, and all the e-cells and the grants which are going there. So I think if you want to really produce product startups which are world class and can compete at a world class level, then you definitely need patient capital.
So I'm going to take you with me to a lot of my pitches. Because we don't need to explain this to the VCs we speak to. But
guys, before we close, I always do one trick question, right? Which is, I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this, but I want to ask you guys, who would you like to see next on the Breathe Easy podcast? And you have to help us get them on the podcast as well.
Tell us what kind of folks you're looking at.
What would you like to see on the podcast?
I think you should perhaps look at it from a scope 3 point of view, right?
Yeah.
Companies or say...
We'll get you back for that.
Companies who are actually forced to move, like say hard to abate industry, or even say not so hard, like say textile industry, like I mentioned, right? Who are forced to move to alternative fuels or energy efficiency so that they continue selling to their customers or at the risk of losing their purchase orders.
Yeah, I have a list of them.
So perhaps one of them. Another one could be a founder, or it could be even an MSME who's trying to solve for it by using, say, energy efficiency technologies and not something breakthrough.
Yes.
So who is trying to say, okay, forget about reporting, forget about how you can solve for all of this. Let's look at it from fundamentals, first principles basis. You have existing process. How can we make the existing process efficient? Which would probably solve half of your problem.
Yeah.
And the remaining half is probably the third person could be in that value chain is someone enabling carbon credits. And then
I'm not a fan. But
we're not big.
After-built industries will have no choice. I mean, carbon capture, sequestration, we try everything. But I think there are some processes which you cannot move away from fossil fuel or coal.
I think Vera needs to do a better job, and then we probably look at credits with a different light. But the way the market currently is...
How happy of that to tell the world that this is very important for companies in India to solve for. They're already struggling with this.
Yeah.
And how can you solve for it?
Yes.
I think, a bunch of startups or, companies which have been able to balance the equation of profit and sustainability.
Yeah.
I think that will be remarkable. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's what the world wants to see. So people still think that it is not possible to do. If you can have 3-4 founders sitting there and talking about how they have actually done, they are there. But it's
Stay
not
tuned for
possible.
our next episode, guys.
My advice would be a little bit tangential. I would say bring in somebody who's a policymaker, bring in somebody who is from a think tank, somebody who's a climate activist.
Academia.
I don't know if we have so much space, but then one startup who has gone beyond the product market fit, has been impactful, and then let them share the story of how they were able to, get to the nuances of getting there without the right support and what it takes for other people to follow the journey. And then how all of them can get together as an ecosystem to enable more.
Amazing. Amazing.
So we're going to come to a close, but before that, one last question, right? Which is within your portfolios, right? Which obviously encompass a lot of sustainability startups. What would you pick as a startup to watch out for? Sailesh, you can exclude us and then look at another portfolio.
Partial guy. I'm being completely partial on this. I want to say breathe.
Oh no!
Because that's what I would
second that as well. From my own portfolio, I'm very excited about Pixel.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's a great investment which we have done, and with all the launches which are soon going to happen there, and translating all that data into real insights for our clients in areas like regenerative agriculture, marine debris, mining. Very, very excited to start realizing the value from Pixel. So very excited on that.
Link in the description.
I am most excited about Emo Energy, which is in the battery tech space. From the outside, it looks like an assembly business, but it's not. And that is what they're trying to break through. So one approach is say, okay, I'll be part of the value chain. But the second approach could be, how can I make use of the existing resources and make it even more efficient?
Yeah.
And that is what Emo has done. So the architecture that they built, the liquid immersion cooling architecture that they built on top of the cells that you are importing from China today, and enabling a 2x life out of it. Which they have demonstrated, and they've got significant revenues for that already. I think them for mobility, but also they can use the same application for energy storage.
Nice.
So the battery energy storage systems with lithium today is a massive opportunity, replacing DG sets perhaps, or even in a way where you could solve for the whole BESS problems. Or even partial replacement.
I would love to see them.
No, I think it sounds exciting. And I think what you got your idea for the next podcast? Bring in Pixel, bring in Emo Energy, 3 MVPs in the room, and then do a PR with that.
That would be amazing, actually. Yeah.
But no, it's exciting times ahead.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you everyone again for taking the time out and number one, educating us, and number two, educating everyone watching this.
We learn the most from founders, honestly.
I second that. Yeah, absolutely.
All the GAN comes from the founders that we have taught.
Yeah.
You guys are the real warriors.
Yeah, we just reiterated in a different narration, but yeah. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Pleasure, guys.
Thank you so
It's been
much.
an honor.
Thank you.
Well done.